Hey, viewer, listen, I know that the rate of loneliness has been on the rise and that we are looking for companionship and warmth of other human beings and just some sort of emotional connection anywhere we can get it. But are AI girlfriends really the way to go? I don't think so, but maybe it is. Who knows? I'm personally not a big fan of them. And it's not because, oh my God, they're gonna make the human race go extinct or whatever, but mainly because the effect they have on our imagination. The problems that an AI relationship with a human being can cause, I think, are a lot more subtle and have important political implication. In particular, the way they impact our imaginations. And you know what? Since Final Fantasy was such a good medium for exploring the idea of technology, I say let's look at Final Fantasy XIV once more to explore this idea of imagination and as it would relate to our contemporary and really all form of politics. Imagination plays an important role in politics, despite the fact that we don't really think about it much. Some philosophers like Al-Farabi would say imagination is the primary way people make judgments. This is why religion has such a big influence on politics because it can tap into your imagination by giving you narratives and stories and more importantly, images. By giving you images, religion literally makes your imagination or imaginative faculty go into overdrive. And let's be honest, everybody much rather read stories than read philosophy books. I mean, who wants to sit there and read David Hume for 3 hours only to realize that they don't like him? Speaking of which, David Hume also has a theory of imagination as it relates to politics and really our impression of the world. For Hume, imagination is not just separating, but also connecting what he calls ideas which we get from our impressions, which is pretty much experiential. We as human beings are a lot more susceptible to stories and anecdotes than we are on facts and abstractions because we can connect with it easier. Basically, our imagination helps us immensely to engage with the world and change it. The element of imagination I would like to focus on, however, is not necessarily judgment, but its creative ability. And I think Final Fantasy XIV would provide a perfect opportunity to do so. When I say politics, you probably think of a government building or maybe a country. Or if I say liberalism, you probably think of the United States or the French Revolution. But if I were to tell you go out there and get me three liberal politics, you would look at me as if I've gone crazy. Although we can very quickly identify politics, we can't really get politics in a physical sense because it literally doesn't exist. Politics is really a construct we have made to be able to live together and become more advanced, to create new things and come up with more awesome ideas like pineapple on pizza. Our imagination pushes us to create and make the world better by giving us a vision of what we want the world to look like. Through social interactions, such visions can become a collective image of what we want our world to look like. Then we work together towards that goal. All good and dandy so far. But here's where things get a little bit wonky. Our imagination can be quite powerful. As you can see, we create whole systems by which we can order our lives and work together and live together. So in a way, they really control our day-to-day lives. We can always imagine a better world, and that's the world we always strive towards. But what happens when the world we imagine to be better is not practically feasible or in fact good? For example, consider a theory that says we all can be equal in this new political systems, anybody can do whatever they want, and there is no coercion. Well, that's all good and dandy, but what happens when somebody betrays other people's trust? Or somebody has something that someone else wants, but there's only one of? In these situations, these theories start falling apart. What I'm suggesting is not really a new critique. In fact, the ancient Greek comedian Aristophanes makes a similar critique of societies that strive toward egalitarianism in this extreme sense. Aristophanes makes fun of this to no end. And this kind of points to a much more important critique in that sometimes what we imagine to be perfect is not really perfect when it meets reality. So if our imagination produces bad ideas, you would think that we will try to fix it. But no, more often than not, we're going to get stubborn and we get really entrenched in what we believe in or what we imagine to be correct. In other words, we kind of get trapped in our own imagination and our own self of righteousness. This is where Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, can become very handy. You see, in the game, there are things called primals. These primals are bosses in the game, but their lore is quite interesting as they are gods of different beastmen. These gods are said to be in the world since its origin, but really they are manifestation of the beastmen's imagination of what they think they should look like. So, if the beastmen imagine a giant fire breathing lizard as their god, that's what it will appear as. What is even more interesting is that the primals act in a way that the beastmen imagine them to act. However, once the primal is manifested into the world, they take over the mind of their worshippers. That's right, in a way, beastmen are literally dominated by their own creation. We have a very similar phenomena in our world. Just think about the people who become so ideologically rigid they become borderline fanatical. Our imagination is limitless. And in a way, that's both good and bad. Because it is limitless, it can help us imagine a better world, and we can work towards that and make that a reality. But on the other hand, what we imagine to be a better world is not practically feasible, and we are constantly trying to make it work, despite the fact that it's not working. This is, I think, where my issue with AI companionship comes into play. I understand why people and companies are investing in AI companionship. I mean, when the loneliness is at an all-time high, it makes sense for people to try to remedy the situation in any way they can. Since AIs can be a way out of loneliness and people are desperate for some sort of companionship, maybe it'll work, but I have my doubts. What is scary to me about this AI companionship model is the idea that AIs you try to establish a relationship with are ultimately a perfect manifestation of what you imagine a perfect companion would be like. In reality, though, people are flawed creatures. We all have our baggage, except me. But a fictional creation doesn't have a baggage like we do. What I'm afraid of is that these type of AI relationship technology will do to us what the primals did to the worshippers in Final Fantasy XIV, trap us in our own imagination of a perfect world. We all aspire for a perfect world. We all want it, but the old adage always proves true. Perfect is the enemy of the good. Our desire for perfection is what pushes us forward. But once we achieve perfection, well, then what? Our imperfections are some of the most interesting part of our experience. And those are what we design our political systems around and our own relationship with one another. We are automatically, in a way, drawn to imperfection. I mean, ask yourself this. Would you watch a movie where the protagonist has no problems and is perfect in every way, overcoming every challenge without any problems? Probably not. You would consider that to be quite boring. Now, imagine a different movie where the protagonist has quite a few issues and is trying really, really hard to overcome them. And through those struggles, we start forming emotional bonds with the protagonist. That makes an interesting protagonist and an interesting story, and by extension, an interesting movie. We are intuitively drawn to people who have imperfections and try to overcome them. But what happens when we achieve the perfect world, our utopia, so to speak? I imagine we all feel trapped and incredibly bored, as if we can't do anything. It's a pretty miserable condition to live in. And that's what I'm afraid AI partnership represents. AI companionship, to me, presents the ability to create a perfect partner. But in the process, we start trapping ourselves in our own imagination, our own perfect idea of what a person should be, and lose touch with our imperfect humanity, which intrinsically connects us to each other. We stop seeing people and politics as they are, flawed things in needs of improvement. But being flawed is part of the human condition. Anyway, that's all for today, viewer. Have a good day.